Hi, welcome back to Woman Conversations in Black and White. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Linda. We have these conversations and we video them on purpose to encourage other women and men to talk across racial lines about sensitive topics, not just your kids and your grandkids as if color doesn't matter, but we are talking about touchy topics across racial lines. And Bernadette, tonight's topic is?
Today's touchy topic, I don't know that it is a formal, what am I looking for, label, but we've decided to call it white exception. And so let me give you an example of what we're talking about. White exception would be I decide I'm going to commit an act of treason and break into the Capitol building. And then when I'm arrested, I decide I'm going to go on a hunger strike because they don't have organic food in jail. And then a judge agrees with me and I get organic food while I'm in prison for committing an act of treason against the very nation.
Yeah, I am as shocked as you are, Bernadette. I am completely as shocked as you are. My husband has a cousin that's been in prison. We all believe wrongly that she was framed. She's been in prison for over 30 years now, 33 years. And she's an exemplary prisoner. And that whole organic food thing, I mean, she can't even get ordinary supplies. Now, she is white, but there's certain privileges. In other words, I don't even understand why a judge would grant anyone that privilege, because privileges in prison are like, you don't get them. You don't get them. So I'm sure if he were Black, that wouldn't have happened from my own perception. No. But also just the very fact of somehow this horrendous internationally watched crime, and he's one of the showy figures in it, he gets special privileges. That I have no explanation for that.
Well, there's him, and there's the lady who's been granted to take the work team building trip to Mexico because she's not considered a flight risk, even though she committed an act of treason as well by illegally breaching the Capitol.
Right.
And now we have a new one who has just asked the judge, can he go to Peru for 2 weeks for his destination wedding because it was pre-planned and prepaid for. Now, if you are wanting to leave the country, I'm thinking committing an act of treason would not be a good idea in my mind to do, because that may hinder me being able to go to Peru. But
I would agree with
yes, but odds are I would be shocked if the judge told him no.
Mm-hmm. So this is issues of race, but it may also be issues of politics that are entering into that. Mm-hmm. And you and I can't know all the dark corners of the judge's minds or the mindset of their. So it's hard to know, but I find myself just as shocked as you are by this. And I would completely agree with you that were the defendant Black and the situation's the same, a Black person was involved in this outrageous crime that was very visible and very filmed, and then asked to be out on good behavior or whatever until mm-hmm. further notice, I think if actually that happened, there would be a white outcry probably. Like, wait a minute, you let this criminal out for this? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And no, instead there's a rather quiet outcry from those of us that find it shocking, but meantime it still happens. So
right. Well, it may be politics, but also it is the system and how they choose to use the system for or against you. Are you familiar with the Khalif Browder story?
Not very. You can feel free to tell us here. I know the name, but I don't know it well.
Well, there is a special on Netflix.
Yeah, and I haven't seen that one, but I remember now it's replaying, but tell our listeners.
Yes, about Khalif Browder, who was a young Black man, maybe 16 or 17, who had been accused of stealing a backpack that he had never stole. So the police roughed him up and arrest him. He is denied. He is well. I don't know if he was denied bail or if they set the bail so exponentially high he would have never been allowed to get out anyhow.
Mhm.
He was, and so while he's awaiting trial, he was sent to Rikers Island, and he was there for years and experienced horrendous treatment from guards and inmates. Now, this is over the accusation of stealing a backpack.
Wow.
We have people who literally breached the Capitol, assaulted Capitol police officers, created a scaffolding to hang a noose, and walked through the federal building with Confederate flags. But they can go to Mexico and they deserve organic food. And I forgot I'm due to get married. Can I go to Peru?
Mhm.
So this is where the tension builds, because you have black and brown people who have seen, unfortunately, entirely too many Khalif Browders
Mhm.
over a span of a lifetime. And then we watch this play out in our faces, and the exceptions that they are granted that we know are solely because they are white.
Right.
And that creates a tremendous amount of tension in between the races. And I don't think white people have made that connection yet, that that is a huge part of the tension.
Yeah. Well put, Bernadette. That's very
Mhm.
well put. I think that's right. And maybe that's the purpose of this talk tonight is if you are white and you're watching this, start looking up Khalif Browder and read the story. You can read a synopsis of it or you can
Mhm.
watch the movie.
Mhm.
Look at some of the others where literally there was no crime committed. There was just I mean, sure, there are some crimes and sometimes the reaction is way out of proportion to the crime, but sometimes there was no crime at all.
Right.
And and then in other cases there was a visible filmed crime, the FBI is involved, and some
Mhm.
judge says, well, that's all right, you'll come back, you can go do your fun in between
Right.
until we figure out what to do with you. But Khalif Browder spent a year in one of the worst prisons in the United
More than a
States.
year. It was years.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if I remember right, then he took his own life after he was
Yes, he
finally
did.
released. Yeah,
Yes, he did. Yeah.
that he was not able to um, leave that behind
Right.
after everything that happened to him.
Mhm.
So yeah, and to we'll do this another topic another time. But you and I both saw on Facebook this week a white person, woman probably, say, well, we should quit talking about all this because racism isn't as bad as it used to be. And we're going to cover that later. But the Black community is extremely aware of all of these things. And as we called it, the white exception, like, well, because you're white, you get the pass, you get the pass, you get the
Mhm.
pass. But because you're Black, you don't get any passes. And we think you're guilty, so you're going to have to suffer until we figure out for sure that you're not.
Mhm. Yes. Whatever we can do to make it the most difficult and punitive and life destructive act that we can legally come up with. That's the option we're going to go with.
Right,
Mhm.
right, precisely.
And so when black and white people get together and have conversations about social justice or the criminal justice system or this, that, and the other, I don't think white people recognize that's that tension that automatically we come with because we've seen it. And then white people are like, well, why are you so angry or why are you so upset?
Right,
They have not made the correlation.
right, right.
Mm.
I haven't lived the Black experience, but listening to you and trying to educate myself has taken me a lot deeper than I ever was before. 2 years
Mhm.
ago, I didn't, I was only vaguely aware of these things. So if you're a white person listening and you mean well, then start educating yourself. Read Black writers, watch Black films, watch Black documentaries that are
Mhm.
explaining it. And it will no longer baffle you why you might sense anger from the Black community as a whole. And maybe at work, the Black people you get along with are just fine and you don't think anything about it, but you take them out and put them with other Black people, and you can bet that the conversations are different than what you have at work.
Yes,
Am I
very,
right?
very much so. Oh, absolutely. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
Very much so. And so, yeah, it is. I told someone, I think I was talking to my supervisor because we were creating a safety plan for a child I was concerned about. And she's white, love her to death, but she's white, works in a rural area. I'm not, working in an urban area. And she said, and she had put on there, well, one of the steps could be she can call the police. And I had to say to her, white people are the only ones that breathe a sigh of relief when the police are on their way.
Hmm. Right.
And she stopped and she goes, you're right. Yes. You are the only ones who breathe a sigh of relief when you know the police are on the way.
Mhm.
We can call the police when we've had an injustice done to us, and it can still be turned around as to where we're the ones who have been criminalized and marginalized and have
Right.
to prove we were the ones in need. Yeah.
Right. And you and
Mhm.
I have both seen stories of that. I
Yes.
mean, either your stories or other people's stories where
Yes.
the Black person that called the police ended up um, being treated as if they were the criminal,
Right.
which
Hmm.
is like unbelievable, but really happening. It's really
Yeah.
happening in real time right
Hmm.
now, still kind of
2021 and
unexpectedly,
all. Yes. Hmm.
right? Yeah, yeah, you don't know where it's going to happen. I mean, maybe the
Right.
police will come and it'll all work out fine, and maybe they'll come and it will end somebody's life
Right.
that that you didn't intend to have ended, or anybody
Right.
intended to have ended. And
Hmm.
so it's like a risk you can't really afford to take.
Right.
And so then you have to figure out, what is the protection, what can I do instead, because
Hmm.
this is not a reliable form of justice. And
Right.
maybe that's the best way to say it. It's
And it's
not
or
a,
it's not a form of justice that I can trust will
right,
be applied equally to me as it would
right,
you. Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Say that again. Just, well, that's a good place to stop. But
It is
go
not
on.
a form of justice that I can believe will apply equally to me as it would you.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what we've seen. That's where we started. Law enforcement and the judicial system is not a form of justice
Right.
that a person of color can reliably depend upon, reliably trust
Right.
to provide justice in a situation
Hmm.
to them compared to a white person.
Right. Right.
And there's items in the news, there's items in the community, there's items in personal life that show
Hmm.
that all
Yes.
the time. So,
Yes. And regular old lived experience. Did I tell you about the one time we've had to call the police out here?
yes, you did. If
Yes.
you
Well,
want to say it again, go ahead.
I'll share it real quick. My son was riding his bike and he had went and visited a friend. And there was a neighbor of the friend who had asked to ride my son's bike. And he said no, which is his right to do. It's his
And how
bike.
old was he at the time?
He Solomon was probably 9. And the little boy who asked him to do it, a little white boy, he was 6. And so Solomon said no. And so the little white boy got mad about it, literally went in his house and got an axe and started swinging at my son, chasing him because he told him no, he couldn't ride his bike. Solomon had the wherewithal. He stopped and asked a neighbor, someone was standing outside, and said, can you either help or call the police? I'm scared. And the child was still chasing him with an axe. The neighbor said, I don't want to get involved in that. For one, how do you see a child being chased with a deadly weapon and you say you don't want to get involved, work it out amongst yourselves? Are you kidding me? That was my first reason to be pissed. And so he had the wherewithal to call 911 as he was on his way home. And so the police officer comes over to get the story. And so the kid's dad had just moved up. I'm divorced. And so it was myself outside, my children's father, and my husband, and Solomon. And so the officer standing at the end of the driveway, my husband is standing to his right, the children's father, my ex-husband, is standing to his left, and I'm standing directly in front of him. And we're telling him the story of how our son has been attacked. Now, granted, when my son called 911 and said what has happened, the 911 operator already knew what that little child's name was and where he lived because he had been called on multiple times already.
Oh, wow.
And so the officer is gathering the information, but implicitly, he unsnaps his holster on his gun and he has his hand on his gun the entire time he is talking to us. And we were the ones who had the injustice committed against us.
Right.
So, do I feel like that was a protect and serve moment? No, because why is your hand on your gun when we called you for help?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
And this is in current day. So, no, not a sigh of relief when we know the police are coming, even
No,
when we called them ourselves.
I understand that.
Mhm.
If you, our listeners, want to take this a little further, one of many resources would be the book called My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Minicum, who talks about the trauma that stays stored in the body, in white bodies, in black bodies, and in police bodies. And it is so brilliant and so compassionate, but also extremely practical. And he is black, by the way, for anyone listening. He's a black body-centered psychotherapist. My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Minicum. It doesn't fix it, but he literally has chapters at the end on things we can all be doing. So tonight, really all Bernadette and I are doing is bringing this into full awareness that if you don't believe that this is so, start paying attention, start watching, because enough of us have to understand where we are in order for anything to change. We have to acknowledge what's really happening before we can go anyplace else. So that's probably our best thoughts for tonight. Do you have anything else to end with, Bernadette?
No, that is our best thoughts for tonight. You know, they say you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been, and we need to acknowledge where we've been, where we are,
where
and
we
then
are,
decide
and where we've
yeah,
been.
and yeah, and then decide where we want to go from here.
Right.
So as always, thank you so much for watching. Please comment, like, rate, subscribe, click the notification bell, and start talking, keep talking. And Linda and I will see you next week.
Thank you.